All right, let's get into this. When you think babysitting, what comes to mind? Probably snacks, maybe a movie, putting the kids to bed. You know, it's supposed to be a pretty straightforward job. But tonight, we're going to pull back that curtain and look at the moments when that simple job turned into something else. We're looking at the terrifying reality that can hide in the most ordinary homes through the eyes of the people who lived through it. That moment right there, that's the pivot point. It's where a normal night just shatters. We're going to deconstruct 3 true stories piece by piece to really understand how a totally routine evening can transform into a desperate fight for survival.
So our first case is about a 15-year-old named Chris. This is his first real babysitting gig, and he's watching a 5-year-old boy, Charlie. And the scene is about as normal as it gets. Nice house, quiet neighborhood, the kind of place you'd never, ever expect anything to go wrong.
The parents are leaving. They're giving him the usual instructions. The dad, Mark, he makes a big point about the back door. Shows Chris 2 different locks, the deadbolt and a regular one on the knob, and he's really clear that he needs to use both. So after Chris gets Charlie to bed, he kicks back in the guest room, probably thinking the hard part's over.
And here we go. This is the first signal. About 40 minutes after bedtime, Charlie shows up in the doorway, looking scared. He says he heard a scratch coming from his closet. Now, Chris does what pretty much any of us would do, right? He figures it's a kid, it's a dark room, houses make noise. He takes a quick peek in the closet, sees nothing, and tucks Charlie back in. Problem solved. Or so he thinks.
Nope. 15 minutes later, Charlie's back. And this time, he's even more freaked out. He says the closet door moved by itself. Chris goes to check, and sure enough, the sliding door is wide open. This is where that disconnect starts. Chris's first thought, this kid is messing with me, trying to be spooky, but Charlie is swearing up and down he didn't touch it. And that little bit of annoyance Chris felt is starting to get replaced by this creepy feeling, because he knows he shut that door. Just look at how fast this all unravels. At 8:30, it's just a scratch, something you can easily explain away. 15 minutes later, you have physical proof something's wrong, that open door. 10 minutes after that, there's a panicked call from Charlie's room. We've gone from a kid's bad dream to a real, active threat in just over 25 minutes. So Chris walks into the room, and Charlie, who's in tears, just points to the corner. And there, squeezed into this tiny space behind a laundry hamper, is a person, crouched down, hiding. Their eyes are looking right at him. In that single instant, his brain doesn't even think, it just reacts. He doesn't scream, he doesn't freeze, he just grabs Charlie, rips him out of that bed, and runs.
So the police show up, and the intruder is gone, slipped right out the front door. But the big question is, how did he get in the first place? The dad, Mark, he goes straight to the back door. And there it is. The top deadbolt is unlocked. Chris had only turned the bottom lock, the one you can kind of jiggle open if you know how. That one single forgotten step, that was the open invitation for this whole nightmare. Okay, let's move on to our second case, because in this one, the threat isn't coming from some stranger outside. Sometimes, the danger is already in the room with you, and it's coming from the one person you're supposed to be protecting. Here we have a 17-year-old sitter watching an 8-year-old kid named AJ. It's her 3rd time watching him, but the first time she's staying overnight. His mom actually calls him a loner who mostly keeps to himself, and she kind of frames it like, hey, this will be an easy job for you. And the first 2 times, it was. AJ just played video games in his room, no trouble at all. But this time, something is just off. The whole vibe is different. He's giving her these unfriendly looks, he grabs his pizza, doesn't say a word, and just goes upstairs. A little later, she catches him just watching her from the crack in her doorway. And when she says his name, he just turns and walks away. Total silence. Each one of these is just a little unsettling red flag. The night goes from just awkward to flat out terrifying. The sitter wakes up later with that deep, primal feeling that someone is in the room. She opens her eyes, and in the dark, there's a shape. Standing at the foot of her bed. She fumbles for the lamp, flicks it on, and it's AJ. Just standing there, completely, unnervingly still. And this is the truly terrifying part. It's not just that he's there, it's the look on his face. This impossible mix of annoyed and scared and regretful. And his hands are behind his back. When she asks him to show her what he's holding, he just shakes his head, no words. Just this cold, unreadable stare. She gets out of bed, slowly walks toward him, and grabs his arm. And that's when she sees it. In his other hand, he's holding the handle of a large kitchen knife. She screams, slams the bedroom door, locks it,
Her hands are shaking so bad she can barely dial Mom's number. The easy job was now a life-or-death situation.
Our last story, this one brings the threat even closer to home. It takes place in a familiar family house, a place that's supposed to be the definition of safe. But in this story, an unseen presence makes itself known through the two people you might be quickest to dismiss, the kids. The babysitter, Dan, is watching his own niece and nephew, 6-year-old Emma and 9-year-old Lucas. First, Emma comes downstairs and says he was just in her room telling her to go to sleep. He knows he wasn't. He was downstairs the whole time, so he figures, okay, she was dreaming. But then, 20 minutes later, Lucas comes down and says the exact same thing. Why did you come into my room? And he even says Dan was standing by his dresser, just looking at him.
And this is the moment where all the logical explanations just start to fall apart. One kid reporting something weird, that could be a dream, for sure. But two different kids with two nearly identical reports, that's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And that's when Dan's gut feeling goes from unease to actual fear. The final confirmation? Emma suddenly runs down the stairs, screaming in pure terror that someone came into her room again.
Dan tells the kids to stay downstairs. He grabs a knife from a kitchen drawer and quietly heads up. As he gets to the top of the stairs, he hears a voice coming from Emma's room. And it's not a kid's voice. It's this weird, high-pitched man's voice. And it says this bone-chilling line. He looks inside and sees a tall man standing right next to his niece's bed.
He doesn't even think about confronting him. He just turns, runs down the stairs, and grabs the kids. As they're all scrambling for the front door, he chances one look back. The man is now at the top of the stairs, peering around the wall, and he's playing this horrible game of peekaboo with his hands right at the children. They bolts out the door, without any shoes on, to a neighbor's house, and the whole time, the intruder just calmly watches them go. Okay, so, wow. 3 totally different scenarios, 3 different kinds of terror. Let's try to connect the dots here. What are the critical survival lessons that we can actually pull from these experiences?
When you look at all 3 of these stories together, a really chilling pattern starts to show up. In every single case, the terrifying truth was hidden behind a perfectly logical, totally boring explanation. A kid's bad dream, a socially awkward kid, kids mixing up dreams and reality. The danger wasn't obvious because our brains are designed to find the most likely answer, not the most dangerous one. And that's the weakness.
So, what do we actually take away from this? First, always listen when a kid says they're scared. Treat it like real information. Charlie knew someone was there. Emma and Lucas knew a stranger was in their rooms. Our instinct as adults is to dismiss it, but their fear was the alarm bell. Second, when stories line up, that's not a coincidence, it's evidence. One kid can have a bad dream. 2 kids describing the same stranger? Something is very wrong. And third, seriously, check your locks. That forgotten deadbolt wasn't a small mistake. It was the welcome mat. Don't assume, always verify.
But really, the one thread that connects all these stories is this. Every single one of these babysitters felt it. That creeping unease, that gut feeling that something was just off, way before the real danger was revealed. Chris knew he shut that door. The second sitter felt unnerved by AJ's silence. Dan knew that 2 kids telling the same story wasn't normal. The lesson here isn't to be paranoid, it's to listen to that feeling. That little voice in your head isn't an overreaction, it's your alarm system trying to get your attention.
We go through our lives just assuming we're safe, especially in a place like a home. But what these stories show us is that safety isn't a guarantee, it's a state of awareness. So the question I want to leave you with isn't if you should question your assumptions about safety, but when was the last time you actually did?